I am Rashed, President of the Canadian Lebanese Association of Prince Edward Island. I'd like to extend our greetings to you on behalf of the executive of the organization. In 2013, it marked the 50th anniversary of the founding of the club on PEI. Through its 50 years, the club has been a voice and an instrument of the Lebanese community. In the early 60s, at the grand opening of his restaurant, my uncle Rashed decided to have a party and invite all the families at the time to attend. During that party, they looked around at each other and they said, you know what, we should start something. In 1963, under the first president, Peter Kays, the club was founded. The Lebanese community is known for their hospitality, love of gathering of friends and family, music, dancing, and the occasional social. Throughout its history on Prince Edward Island, we have major achievements in law, music, business, arts, and rising to the level of not one, but two premiers. The following are some stories of some of those families. And here's to the next 50 years.
It was just this little stream coming into the island, finding its way around the rocks and into the low places, and it worked.
Like yesterday, we left Lebanon behind.
Where we grew up.
With memories that filled our minds.
Felt like yesterday.
When we traveled overseas.
To a small place in Canada.
Where hope and promise will be. A place for our families to build and explore.
A place where our children can grow free of war.
A land to the north, so different than ours.
Where winters are cold and spring gave us showers.
Where summers were short.
But now we can breathe.
Away from the bombing.
And struggle to leave.
Was like yesterday.
When all this began.
And a new place called home. A cradle of land.
Though the yearning of home never goes away. We cherished in songs and culture-filled ways.
But there's love for this new land. We now have shown.
That has given us hopes, dreams.
To a new place called home.
Felt like yesterday when we entered a new life.
Felt like yesterday.
When the lighthouse showed us new light.
Thank you.
My name's David Wheel, and I taught history at the University of Prince Edward Island for a long time, 30 years. I'm a writer, and in 1988 I wrote a little book called A Stream Out of Lebanon, which happened almost accidentally. I had given a talk at a series that was going on at the museum called Migrants to PEI, and I had some information about, especially about the Lebanese peddlers going to the country, as they called it. And so they asked me would I do a talk. I did it, and then it turned into this book, which is, I was no expert, never was, still am not an expert on migration or on the Lebanese, but I knew enough, and my idea was needed to get something down to get the ball rolling, to get people interested, because, you know, at that time in the 80s, that first generation of Lebanese immigrants were disappearing, and they were taking their stories with them.
Hi, I'm Robert Giz, currently the Premier of the province of Prince Edward Island. My last name obviously is of Lebanese origin, but I'm happy to say that I'm Canadian because I'm half Lebanese, half Scottish. But I think if you look at tracing back my family history, we've got a long history here in Canada on my Lebanese side. It was during the Second World War, probably around 1944. My grandfather, my Jiddi, Atella Joseph Giz, who was at the time living in the West Indies. He was living in St. Kitts. He had left Lebanon when he was around 20, and he wanted to go and visit his old babysitter from Lebanon, from their village. And that babysitter happened to live in Prince Edward Island. So my Jiddi, I guess, took a boat from St. Kitts, came to Prince Edward Island, to Charlottetown, to visit his old babysitter. And at that time, he was probably around 34 to 35 years old. And when he got here, he met his babysitter's daughter, who of course happened to be my Siti. So they met. He asked for her hand in marriage. They got married here in Prince Edward Island around 1944-ish. Right off the bat, got pregnant, but my grandfather wanted to go back to St. Kitts. They moved back, and my grandmother got extremely sick. She was pregnant. She wasn't feeling good. There was a risk she was going to lose the baby. And they went to see a doctor in St. Kitts, and the doctor said that just a different environment, the heat down here, everything, you're not conducive to it. You should probably, if you want to save the baby, go back to Prince Edward Island. And my Siti still used to tell me the story that they packed everything up, and my grandfather had got her a nice coat. You know, you can tell this story now, you wouldn't tell it back then, but got her a nice coat, and they moved back to Prince Edward Island. And of course, in those days, it was hard to move merchandise around and money around. And my grandmother had no idea. But what my grandfather did was took his life savings, which probably would have been a few $1,000s, and sewed it on the inside of my Siti's jacket. So he didn't tell her. She didn't know because she would be a nervous Nellie. And they got to Canada, and then he took out the few $1,000s that he had saved up, and he opened up a corner store here with the help of his father-in-law and mother-in-law. Opened up a corner store here. That baby was born, who was saved, and it happened to be my father, who was Joseph Giz. When Lebanese families arrived here, the big thing that they did was they wrote back to their family in Lebanon, and then a lot would then end up wanting to come to Prince Edward Island. When they heard about the lifestyle and the opportunities that existed here in Canada, and the respect that Canadians had for different cultures around the world. It was a safe place to live. It was a free place to live. You could practice your religion. You could do a whole lot of things here without any repercussions, because we were an open society. When I first got into politics, it would have been 2003, and I was known as Robert Giz, the son of Joe, who was a former premier here in the province. But in PEI, we have small ridings, so we go door to door, knocking door to door. And I had what would be called the east end of Charlottetown, Old Charlottetown. That was part of my riding. And it amazed me that when I knocked on doors in 2003, the first time introducing myself, saying, "Hi, I'm Robert Giz. I'm running for this seat here in the legislature and for Premier of Prince Edward Island." The majority of the older people in the riding did not say, "Oh yeah, I know your father Joe," or "I knew your father Joe who was Premier of Prince Edward Island." They said, "I remembered going to your grandfather's corner store." That's what I got more than knowing that my father was Premier of Prince Edward Island. It really amazed me, the influence, because this was back before the Superstore or the Sobeys or the big co-ops or anything like that. There was corner stores, and everybody went there. And that's how they got to know the Lebanese community and trusted them. And you know, back then, there was charge accounts at these corner stores, and if people had trouble making their payments and they needed milk or eggs for their kids, you know, they helped out. They were, I think the Lebanese were very generous when they first arrived. They didn't have anything themselves, so they knew how hard it was to get by. And it was amazing that when I knocked on those doors, I was better known as the grandson of Attila Joseph than I was of the son of Joseph Attila.
قصة اغتراب قلم لبيب داود أبو راشد. تركت بلادي والوطن غالي، كانت الفرقة قاسي على حالي. هجرت الوطن من مدي بعيدي، قصدي تفتش عن عيشي سعيدي. وكانت كندا علي كريمة، وعطتني كتير من خيراتها العديدة. صيفها جنة والشتوية عظيمة، وسمكاتها بالنهر عطول ايدي. ودعت الجبل والسهل والوادي، ودموع تجري ع فرقة بلادي. تركت بلادي وكنت بالعشرين، قصدي تأبقى هون 5 سنين. صار الوقت يمضى بسرعة كثير، وربيع العمر صفى بشهر تشرين. تركنا المناخ النقي وجبل صنين، أيام حلوة كتير قطف العنب والتين. الكفاير بقمحة وكوكبة، الحاسباني بشللات جزين. الإخوة إجا الواحد ورا الثاني، حتى سوا نعيش بخير وأماني. حبوا الجزيرة وأرض هالبلاد، حسرة بالقلب ع أهلنا البعاد. ويلنا من تركة الأهل والأجداد، بعد ما صار عنا الأولاد والأحفاد. لكن القلب يرجع ويتذكر، لرب السما نسجد ونتشكر. لهالنعمة اللي عطانا وغلاتها، نشكر كندا بجودها وخيراتها.
I'm Colleen Charbel, and I was born on February the 26th, 1944 in Summerside.
I'm Christine Charbel Smith, and I was born on December 20th, 1957 in Summerside.
My grandfather, Khalil Charbel, he immigrated to Canada in 1891. He was 22 years old at the time. And in that time, Lebanon was under the Turkish rule, so they had a really hard time. They suffered a lot. And a distant cousin of Khalil's had moved to North America earlier, and he was in touch with the family, and that's why Khalil moved to Prince Edward Island, Canada.
He wasn't able to speak English, but he settled in Cascapec first, and he began like backpedaling.
There were some people who were scared of him, but they soon get to know the peddler, and they were happy to get all these things that they didn't have any way of getting.
And he would also bring news about the neighbors to them, like when he would stop in. So they were really happy to see the peddlers. 3 years after Khalil immigrated, 1894, his wife Hope came over from Lebanon with her 3-year-old son Dumet, which would be my father's oldest brother, and her mother. They came over on ship, and they were on the ship for 31 days. And her mother took really sick on the ship, and she died and was buried in the Mediterranean Sea. When Hope arrived in Summerside with Dumet, her son, she walked around Summerside because they had made arrangements for somebody to put a picture of Khalil in a store window. So she saw the picture and she went into the store, and that person took her and her son to Cascapec, where Khalil was living.
Hope and Khalil lived in Cascapec for 6 years, and they met many people and made a lot of friends in the surrounding districts. And then in 1897, Khalil decided to move to Portage and build a store because the railway went through Portage. And even though it was all swamp and blueberry ground, he foresaw that it would be a commercial place later on in the future. So he, with the help of the community there, and he built a store, and he carried everything that people wanted, like groceries and clothing and hardware and feed. But he continued his peddling business too, because now he had more than one team of horses and wagon. He had a couple, I guess.
So I guess business was doing really well for several years, and then one night in the middle of the night in 1913, I think, a fire burned them out completely. They lost everything. And they had 8 children by this time, and Khalil was really disappointed, but the neighbors took the children in and looked after them and encouraged Khalil to rebuild. So with the help of R.T. Holman, who was a businessman in Summerside, he gave my grandfather all the material to rebuild the store, And then in exchange for that, my grandfather bought all of his goods from R.T. Holman's for the rest of his business life. And our father did that as well.
Yeah.
He had an appreciation for what they did for Khalil.
In 1940, his wife Hope died, and Khalil kind of lost his will to carry on with the business. And in 1942, he sold it to his oldest son, or no, third oldest son, Elmer. And he ran the business for a while with a brother and sister, Gabe and Molly. But Elmer was really busy because he had a fish mart and a hotel.
He was shipping geese to the United States as well, and so he didn't really have time to run it.
And smelts, he dealt with smelts.
Yeah.
So then at that point, the youngest brother, which is our father, Edward, he bought the business in 1945. He built a gas station and later a general store. My father's sons, Blake and Dale, took over the business in 1994. And the store closed in 2009. And for the first time in 112 years, the Charbel family were no longer doing business in Portage. And it's kind of sad because it's not just the Charbel's business that's gone, but the name is slowly disappearing too because we only really have 3 female great-grandchildren that have the name Charbel.
Prince Edward Island was very homogeneous for a long time. I mean, there were, I say in the introduction to the book, if you take a circle in a few hundred miles and put the center in London and draw a circle, that everybody on PEI except for the Lebanese and the Mi'kmaq came from inside that circle, Western European. And a lot of them were Celtic ancestry. Even some of the French had Celtic ancestry and British. But those settled, the island kind of community congealed somewhere, in the early 1800s and had remained very stable. Then all of a sudden you have a different group attempting to get in. And that was no easy feat because it was a very, it was not a wealthy society. It was very tightly knit society, with the little communities, the clan system. I mean, it was an audacious thing to actually try to get in to PEI society. I mean, even today, people joke about it, but the island is a notoriously difficult place to find your spot because everybody here is related to everybody else or knows everybody else, and you can join a club, but you can't join a family.
My name is Lloyd Solomon. I'm currently living in Lower Roller Bay.
Maria Stell Bolger. I was born in Georgetown in 1909. I am now 104, going on 105.
And my name is Patricia Brooke. I'm her daughter, and I was also born in Georgetown. I'm 76.
My grandfather was born in January 1874 in El Alamein, Lebanon. That's in the southern part of Lebanon, in the area that we call Phoenicia. Originally left Lebanon in 1895. His name was Peter Abu Sleiman. It was translated by my grandfather as being Peter Solomon. 2 other brothers left Lebanon at the same time. Frank, his brother, came with him, and Paul, an older brother, left and went to New Mexico.
And according to what I heard, the Turks were in war with them for 100 years, and they were killing off the Catholics. And they had a church, and the priest told them that they better skip the country as fast as they could to get away. And there's 3 brothers.
They came from that area when it was part of Syria, before the Lebanon was carved out in 1910.
Their father, who was a general in the army, decided to send them over. The older brother came first, and then Peter and Frank, who was Mother's father, he was about 14 and 15. They were
16 and 14.
16 and 14. They came over together all by themselves to Ellis Island in New York.
Yeah.
And had nobody, and I think a piece of jewelry of her grandmother's, and that's about all they had. And they worked with on the docks for a while.
Worked his way up to the CLAPEI because people spoke French in that region. Settled for a short while in Tignish, and then found his way down to Georgetown.
Grandpa always said, what did he say about Prince Edward Island?
I said, why did you stop here, Papa? And he said, because the people were genteel, and that's what we're used to.
My father ran, as most Lebanese, he ran a store in Georgetown. My grandfather, in order to ensure some kind of menial livelihood for himself, was known throughout the north side of Kings County and in Georgetown as the Picture Man.
The original name was Abu Sliman, and so when they came to North America, they changed it to Solomon.
In 1914, opened a little grocery store in Georgetown.
And Mom would always give us an orange or a piece of fruit to take to school. And there was two girls, one on each side would be, here they come, and grab the fruit from us. We never did get to eat them because we were foreigners. That's how they treated you.
Sort of, again, the backbone of the town eventually, because with the grocery store and the barber shop and so on, but he worked his way up. They worked from nothing to that. The two brothers had married two sisters.
Yeah, this is a picture my grandfather took in 1902, Peter J. Solomon. He took this of McCormick Child, who was only 5 years old, up on the north side in St. Margaret's, Prince Edward Island. And that's the Bank of Nova Scotia that we turned into a store. That's how it used to be our hardware. That's where I lived, our hardware and dry goods store. That's a positive. In Georgetown. Yeah, it's now known as the Georgetown Inn. Family. This is my grandfather and all the family in his backyard. This was his main camera here. This one. See, it's an old camera, eh? My grandmother told me too when they were taking pictures back that when he took family photographs, he had to put a clamp back of their neck so they wouldn't move. And they'd have to keep, I said, how long did you? She said, nobody ever smiled. I said, why didn't they smile? She said, because that clamp was in the back of your neck for a whole minute, because he had to expose that thing for at least 10 seconds, to get the picture, eh?
This was in Georgetown, and he had planted grapes in the backyard, plus a garden. Mother's in there, and Grandpa's in there, and a couple of other of her family members are in there. How do you live to be 105? I say carrots. You've eaten carrots every day of your life. I always think that.
Carrots and cabbage and.
But carrots are a big thing with you.
Yeah. And onions.
And the exercise. Your exercise.
And I exercise.
واسقوها للنسامة طور الخيل. خليكم.
صح. ايه معلم لبيب، لما جيتوا اول ما جيتوا على البلد كيف كانت الامور ها؟
شو كانت هون قرية شارلتاون كانت قرية بعدها، قرية صغيرة يعني. كيركوت نيوز هيك كان ضايعة شوي. لما جيت لهون قلت له المانجر تبع الباص بقطوة بدي اروح على الجزيرة تشتغل. ضحك. العالم تجي من الجزيرة لهون تيشتغلوا، ما يروحوش من قطوة على الجزيرة تيشتغلوا. بهذيك الأيام.
أي سنة جيت لهون؟
سنة ال 58.
My name is Paul Tweel. I was born in Charlottetown in 1933. I'm a twin brother. My folks moved here in 1931. They came from Lebanon originally, but they lived in Cuba for at least 10 years prior to coming to PEI. My father was probably sponsored by his brother, Niemer. I think at first he was a shoe cobbler and he worked for someone. Then later on he bought the building which we now lived in for many years. He had a corner store there, and in the other part of the building he had a shoemaker. My mother was kind of looking after the store, and to the best of her knowledge, because she couldn't speak English too well. 5 children born before they came to the island. I guess they were born in Cuba. Then the rest of us were born here, for a family of 9. We operated a business for, in total, it was about 65 years when we had the store going. And my father, after raising 9 children, working day and night like pretty well most immigrants. After going to school, you always had to come back in and help in the store, doing all the labor work. Cause at that time, when you had a small store, you probably couldn't afford to have help, so you had the children doing the work. And then we all kind of got into the business. During the Depression, when my father had the store, a lot of things were rationed. Something like molasses and sugar, which was hard to get. And you had to have a coupon to purchase those things. It made it a tough struggle just running a business at that time, because you weren't access to a lot of the food materials that you were selling at the time. You know, I guess you overcome those things through time, and you go on. And on the right side is my sister, Amelia. My father is right back here in the meat counter. Older brother, Jim, is right here, and that's my other brother, Mel. Another thing about growing up in Charlottetown, I found that, well, I get along great with most people, but you have a small amount of prejudice from certain people because you're from another background, and we overcome that. But they don't last, but people feel like they have to get that little dig in there when they want to, but we overcome it, and so just keep on going.
من 1976 لما جينا لهون كانت كمان لنا كانت بيج شوك انه نجي على تشارلتون نلاقيها صغيره لانه انا مثلا خلقت مش خلقت انه ربيت بعلاء مدينه حد بيروت يعني بتعد شيء يمكن كانت بهذيك الايام 100,000 كانت مدينه
علاء
ايه هلا لما جينا من علاء لهون على تشارلتون كانت بيج شوك لإلي لانه وصلنا ولقينا بيوت بس بيوت وطرقات ضيقه عرفت كيف؟ انه كنت مفكر بدي انقل من مدينه لمدينه.
My name is Gladys Kays Durrani. I was born in Charlottetown, PEI in 1933.
My name is George Elias Kays. I was born in May 1930, May 6th, in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. I'm 83 now.
My father came from Kfair in 1913, and he went to Montreal, met my mother. She was born in Montreal. They married and came back here. My mom could only speak French and Arabic, so she learned English in the grocery store. Ian Kays and Sons on the corner of Queen Street and Chestnut Street. They had 5 boys, then me, and then 3 more boys.
I lived on Chestnut Street up until the day we got married, 62, yeah, 62, and lived with Mom and Pop, and then we got married, and I met Georgette there at
my reception.
Sister's wedding reception. And I shouldn't say I met her there. I used to call in their store. And I got a good look at her at the wedding party. And that was the end of that. And we started going together. And we've been married now 51 years.
When I was 25, I decided I wanted to go and see something else besides Charlottetown. So I moved up to Montreal to live with my grandmother and my uncle and his wife. I met my husband. He lived next door. We went out together for about a year, and we got married in the Orthodox Church there because all of my brothers and myself, we were all baptized at St. Nicholas Orthodox Church in Montreal. So we got married up there and then came back here. We stayed here for about 2 years and then moved back to Montreal and eventually came home for good.
Brother Paul started with my father. Father helped him out to start it off. I was running a lunch counter for my brother Jimmy. He couldn't stand it, so Pop told me to take it over. It's on the corner of Queen and Chestnut. The old Northern Lunch, the old Northern Lunch. And we sold it to Jabours after that. Paul Case. Paul was the first, 1963 and 64. Then Harry Shamma, Abe Zakem, Frank Weatherby, Peter Case, Paul Tweel, myself. The first used to meet at the old IOF hall, where the Cloud room is now. We used to have the upstairs there. We couldn't get in the New Year's party, New Year's Day, and the levees. So we said we'd have a little party a week or two after. And we've been going ever since. It started off with about 20 couples, then it ended up to about 700.
Okay, this is Badia Tweel, Mrs. Neckett Tweel. And this is Mrs. Charles McCarris. Mr. Weatherby, my mom, Neda Case, and Mrs. Jabour. Well, I talk to my grandkids all the time about my parents and my brothers, you know, everything that's been going on through the years. And they still remember everything that I've taught them. And now I've got my little great-granddaughter. I'm trying to talk to her about her ancestors, and she's catching on. She's 5 years old now. Yeah, and actually, I'd like to see the Durrani name carried on too. So I've only got Andrew, one grandson. So I hope he keeps it going for a long time.
This is a book my father wrote regarding the neighborhood family-run corner grocery experience. I'm sitting in the family home. This is my father's office, and he spent much time in here on the computer and researching books and doing things every day. I'm just going to read the introduction. The neighborhood family-run corner store, like the family farm, was an integral part of communities across Prince Edward Island. It was more than just a business, it was a way of life. Besides providing basic food needs and other miscellaneous items, the store served as a focal point of the community. It served as a place to meet your neighbor, catch up on the local gossip, and even discuss political issues of the day. Everyone knew his or her neighbor by name and quite often banded together to help someone in need. It definitely was a slower pace of life, and many people seemed to be more content and happier with what they had than they are today. These neighborhood stores are for most part gone because they played such an important role in creating a sense of community and impressed upon me the importance of local involvement in political decision making. I felt it was important to write a few reflections to pass on to my family and friends. Much of history gets lost if it's not documented, and this was a big part of history in PEI, the grocery stores and the little corner stores, and so I think he felt it was important to write it down. Yeah, I was mayor in the 70s and went to work with the province and led the way for other Lebanese people such as Joe Giz and these other people that went into public life. Very involved with the community in the town. That was right up till the point where he died. He was still often would go to city hall meetings, and that was sort of his way of thinking. If you weren't going to get involved, then you have nothing to complain about.
The Lebanese were never flashy. They were never loud. And I think that was part of what I call their accommodative genius. They knew not to, as one, I forget who it was, that told me, but said, we don't make waves. And that was just intelligence. That was accommodative intelligence, knowing that if you're a little small group in a majority culture, you just have to go about your business. If you have a grievance, you keep it to yourself. And I heard that over and over again, is that, you know, yes, there were things to complain about by times. There was a negative response from certain people. Not that much, but a lot more than we know. Let's put it that way. A lot more than we know. I'd be very certain of that. But it was just understood by these people, the Lebanese, that you don't talk about that. What's the point of talking about that? What's the point of making a fuss? It's just going to draw attention to it. It's just going to make it worse. They were smart. They were really smart in that way. And so as a result, you know, within a couple of generations, they are firmly established, accepted part of the community. Beautiful story, beautiful story.
I was born in CLAPEI, Hasbaya, 1940, May the 8th. I immigrated to Canada, 1966. I was young widow when I came. I have beautiful 2 children when I came to Canada. My brother took me in, and I survived with them for 2 years. I was working at my brother's store as a waitress, and I want to finish my education because I did not have a chance with my language English. So I stayed home mom, and I helped with the restaurant. I was married to my husband 1968, and we have 3 children.
My name is Abe Zaycom, Abraham. I was born in Quebec, Comunity, in 3rd of March 1929. I moved to PEI in 1936. The whole family moved to Charlottetown, and with 6 children, my parents, and we opened a store on Grafton and Weymouth, and that was our home for a number of years. And then 1948 we bought the property across the street and built a new home, a new store, and there we were there for 1948 until 79. Well, my mother had a sister here in Charlottetown, the only sister, and she was always asking her to move to PEI. We were going to move to Montreal at the time, but then we decided to come to PEI. We had a grocery store and people were nice. We had a lot of customers, and we didn't see any difference. We played with the kids, neighbors. Everybody was very nice to us. We stayed, we stood to our own ground. We mind our own business, ran the grocery business, and looked after the customers the best we could, and we mixed in. And later on we joined organizations such as the Boy Scouts and Liberal Party and politics, so forth, church groups, Knights of Columbus, all the organizations that we could join in, we got in, and we had no problem with anybody. It was very good.
We all went together, all my brothers. My beautiful brother went with the family together. I saw my sister, maybe that's for my last time. And my favorite memory, it's in my heart now, forever. And I never forget it. The gathering we have, and they were very pleasant. And I don't know, just the feeling, it took me back. I went to Harissa Shrine, they call this beautiful shrine. And Uncle Abe went all the stairs, up the stairs. He visited all the top of it, Shrine of Harissa. God love him. He climbed all the way up.
121.
84 years old.
121 steps.
Yeah. My daughter was asking to have a baby. And after 7 years, she couldn't have children. And then I told her, don't give up hope. Don't give up on God. She said, I don't, Mom. So every church I went, especially Harissa, I pray for miracle for her. And then she called me after 3 weeks. She said, Mom, she started to cry. I said, why are you crying before we left? She said, because I can't give you a baby, Mom. You and Dad, everybody have children except me. So I said, just leave your faith with you. So when I went back there, I prayed as much as I can, and I knelt and I said, please God, if this girl meant to be to have a baby, please, I beg you, just answer my prayer. And God did. She phoned me after 3 weeks. She said, Mom, I'm pregnant. So that's a miracle to us. When he was a young man, he lost his mom at 3 years old. Then when he's married mom, he moved to the village with CLAPEI and lived with his in-law. And he used to have a mill, flour mill, my father. That's his business. And then he go to Kaukaba, and then he go to CLAPEI, and I used to hear that he have a beautiful white horse. He used to go date mom, go on the horse every day to see my mother and come back to his village.
جينا بال 76 بس نحن كنا لاكي انه جينا في ناس قبلنا هون يستقبلونا، مرتي خلقاني هون وراحوا على لبنان تجوزنا وجينا. جينا في بيت كان فيش 50 شخص على المطار استقبلونا، غير الشكل عن اللي اجوا من ايام زمان اللي ما فيش اجوا
بالبابوره. يعني عندكم عائله اوريدي كان هون موجود.
اول جمعه اجا ابو داوود تاع بلش معنا بالستريت.
كان عنده مطعم.
كان عنده مطعم. احنا وبلشنا نروح مع السمك معه وانبسطنا وما عادش ننقل فلينا من الجزيره. بعد 6 اشهر اشترينا المحل على جرافتن تحت وبلشنا نشتغل.
This song I'm going to sing is just like a national anthem to Lebanon, especially, or the army in Lebanon, whatever. Okay? So. Oh, يا بني. Oh, يا بني. يا بني بلادك قلبك عطيها وغير فكرك ما بيغنيها، محميتها يا ابني من الويلات ما في حدا غيرك بيحميها. بيك موصيلك قبل ما مات، بلادك صلاة للحب صليها. I met him 2 years ago in Beirut, and that was it's a big honor for us, like, you know, to meet him. He's one of the legend of the country, and singing, of course. He means everything in the good times. When you just love to sing his songs, and you know he's just a big singer in the Middle East. He's well known all over the world. He's a big legend. So I'm so honored to sing his songs. Yeah.
غايبين بهواكم قلبي دايب، أحبابي كتار وانتو أغلى الحبايب، أحبابي كتار وانتو أغلى الحبايب، يا غايبين بهواكم قلبي دايب، أحبابي كتار وانتو أغلى الحبايب، يا غايبين طولتوا علينا الغيب بعد الهجران، يا الله عودوا لينا بعد الهجران، يا غير الله ما يصبرني ملاني جراح، غير الله ما يصبرني. يا رفيق الروح ليش تروح وتهجرني، طبعك عجيب ومنه شفت العجايب، يا غايبين بهواكم قلبي غايب، أحبابي كتار وانتو أغلى الحبايب، أحبابي كتار وانتو أغلى الحبايب.
There were only a few families. I mean, by the early 1900s, You know, if the earliest Lebanese merchant came here in 1888, which was as close as I could get to it, then, you know, within 20 years, there were still just a handful, but there were enough that they sent messages back home, you know, where they are. Because, I mean, my understanding is that a lot of, you know, there was persecution from the Turks at the time, and a lot of the Lebanese who were leaving in droves, they didn't even know where they were going to end up. They would get on a boat in Marseille in France, and when they stepped ashore, they weren't sure it could be anywhere. It could be South America, it could be the US, or it could be Halifax. And so, I mean, that's quite an adventure in itself. And then, you know, and then I remember hearing, I think it was a Kay's woman that told me that, you know, her father was in Pictou or something. And he looked across and he said, he saw something over there. He said, what's that over there? And somebody said, well, there's an island over there. And he said, I think I'll go over there. And so he went over there. And of course, the Kays and the Giz, I think it's the same name in Lebanon. Of course, been here ever since.
I'm Doreen Kays, Doreen Wadad Kays. I'm proud to say I have a Lebanese second name. And I was born here in Charlottetown on July 31st, 1941.
And I'm Diane Kays, Diane Elizabeth Kays, and I'm the youngest in the family. And I was born October 5th, 1945.
Dad came first in 1922. And he was here 17 years before he went back, and he was looking for a wife, of course. He went to our grandmother, Siti, and to ask if Asma is my mom's name was.
And Saeed, Dad's name.
ESMA, yeah. And Saeed, and he asked her if Asma would be interested. And she said, to her credit, she had 7 girls, the poor woman. Our Jiddu was passed on. And she said, you'll have to ask her. This says nothing, you know, I'm not going to take responsibility for that.
My mom said, no, 3 months and then I'll give you my decision.
Yeah.
And that was
And
it.
she agreed. I mean, you consider how traumatic that would have to be.
Yeah, 17.
You're leaving not only your country and your family, your whole identity, and coming to a man you barely know, and you're coming to this new life. I mean,
and there's no large community waiting for you.
No.
And everyone that was here
it's
was
not
on my
Montreal.
What everybody that was here waiting for was on my father's side. So
And
that
they
was
were all elderly.
Yeah, and they were all older.
Because my dad was 23 years older than Mom.
Yeah.
Yeah. 23. So there's quite a difference there.
When Dad came, it was because the Turks.
There was no intent to go back. You know, I'm going to succeed, and but I'm going back home. There was none of that. This is the life. We're going to make the best of it here. This is where we're bringing up our children and educating them.
I think we had the best of both worlds.
Yes, we did.
Because we certainly kept the language, kept the
Culture,
culture, the food,
music,
always in terms of listening to what was going on in Lebanon, keeping in touch with Siti and our aunts
and we had a great understanding of the language because while they may have spoken to us in both languages, English and Arabic, we understood Arabic. We just didn't have the opportunity to speak it.
Yeah, we forgot about Hazel. Our older sister was born in 1940.
Yes.
And
there were just the 3 of us, 3 girls.
Just 3 girls. But the 3 of us went last September, October of 2012. And Hazel and I, that was our first trip.
Nothing can prepare you.
Wow, it was
for the emotional experience of actually, and everyone will agree who's been
so
been through
emotional.
This. It's so emotional
to see all these places that we heard about. One, that I lost my name, Guz, and became Kays. Mr. Weatherby said, did you ever regret or feel badly that you didn't have any boys? And my father said, I will always remember, he said, in Arabic, of course, he said, I wouldn't trade my 3 girls for any number of boys.
When they landed in Borden, the red clay roads, I mean, you have to
Yes.
visualize that this is not the Charlottetown or PEI of today.
We pulled up in front of the Lieutenant Governor's house, and Mom was so excited, and she got out, and then Dad announced that, no, it was just a joke. Well, she didn't find it funny, but he did.
But anyway, was it? She had a nice house that she
Yeah.
ended up in.
Yeah. To be proud of your background.
Without it being exclusive.
And to remember how hard our forefathers and foremothers worked to come to a strange land, and didn't know the language, and what they went through, and a lot of it was for us and for the community.
Yeah.
And they still love Lebanon and always
Yeah.
did right to the end.
Yeah, a wonderful duality of cultures. We're very fortunate.
Well, if I want to speak about my writing on immigration, I have to go back to my first novel, Birds of September, which I wrote after the immigration of my brothers and sister to Prince Edward Island in Canada. I am the eldest in the family. I'm like their mother, so it touched me very deeply. It was hurting. But thank God they were enjoying their life in a civilized country.
My name is Labib Dahoud Abu Rashed, Labib David Abu Rashed. And I came from Lebanon, was born in Kaukaba, raised in Kfair, and I came here in 1954. I came to Ottawa, Ontario.
My name is Jean Zakem Rashed. I was born in Comunity, Quebec. We were one of 6 children, and my father brought us all here because my mother wanted to come and be by her sister.
What's your name? I said, Labib. Labib, what should we call you in Canadian name? I thought you have to change your name, you know. We'll call you Larry or Lawrence or... I said Larry would be okay. I thought, you know, you have to have another name.
We spoke French. I spoke French then, and then my mother would speak Arabic. And then as we started to school, went to Notre Dame.
And then I stayed in Ottawa. I was working in, first of all, in grocery store and cafeteria. And for a couple of months, then I went working in a department store.
And my mother didn't have English. She didn't know English. So it was very difficult for her in the store. Anyway, we were learning it faster than her. And I remember sitting down and taking a grade 1 reader and teaching my mother how to read, try to get her to read, and she would a little bit. Things were rationed back then, and we'd help put stickers on these little sheets that they would supply you, and you'd put it, and then you'd have to send it. I don't know where they sent it, but anyway, we'd have to help out and do that.
I have a cousin of mine came here to PEI, Saeed Haddad. He got married to Suad Tweed, and I came here for a visit and I fell in love with the island, and I opened a snack bar in a restaurant, and they came here. They had to find something to do. So we started our first restaurant, Larry's Restaurant.
Well, my father sent money to my uncle to buy us where Larry's restaurant was. That's where we lived, in that house, 266. So we stayed there at that house. And we lived there all the time until 1949, 50, we moved across the street. And I was in grade 10.
And that happened to be across from Zakem's store. Zakem were right across the street. And we used to go and buy hamburger and meat and different things from the store and come back. And till 3 years after, we used to see Jean and my wife and her sister and her brothers, and we never thought of anything till about 3 years after. We get to know them more, and we decided to get married. And we went to Lebanon for our honeymoon for 5 months. When we went back, they were just like strangers. I mean, you don't see your parents for 10 years, and they're not, you don't have any, you don't know how they are for the last 10 years, you lose track. Anyhow, we stayed for 5-6 months, and came back, and we started our family. When we went there, the children went to the old house. They seen where I was born. That was the best feeling I had in my life.
This is my first visit to Lebanon and the first visit to my grandfather's house. I dreamt about this moment for a long time. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I heard a lot of stories about this house growing up, and I can't believe I'm here. It's really it's a miracle that I'm here today. The people that come from here, they take this place with them wherever they go. And my father took, this was with their hearts. When they all moved to PEI, Canada, they were, this is where they're from. This is their roots. This is their life. And they wanted so much to make sure that we knew that. That was important to them to know where we came from.
أنا نقلت على الجزيرة لهون سنة ال 91 أو 90. ما كانش فيها الشيء هذا، يعني اللي كنا نلاقيه بالمدينة مونريال مش موجود هون. فكمان أنا تفاجأت رغم إنه قاعد بكندا كناش نحس إنه شارل تاون فيه هيك بلد صغيرة أو مقاطعة مش كبيرة يعني مثل شارل تاون. انبسطت أنا هون إنه بلد صغيرة، الناس كتير قراب لبعضها، كنا كل ليلة نسهر لما كنا نجي نشم الهوا هون، نروح على السمك، نروح على السباحة ونسهر، هذا بنفس النهار بالصيف. حبيت الجزيرة وعلى هالأساس إنه نقلنا.
My name is George Bassett. I was born in Lebanon, in South Lebanon, in Al-Kufair. That's my village name. I was born 1937, September the 7th. I came by boat to Canada in 1959. My sister came 1 year before me. And when I came, I landed in Montreal, and they shipped me to Halifax there, and from there, one of my relatives picked me up and took me to Charlottetown. So I rented the 302 Grafton Street. It was a store there. I rented and I worked in it for almost 40 years. In the 70s, the situation has got very bad in Lebanon, in South Lebanon. And my father, he was responsible for the power company, and he was looking after a number of villages on the border, and he was really in danger every day. So my sister in Brazil, she asked him to come and visit her. and from Brazil I brought him in here. I had a brother, and I brought him to here to save him from the war. And he was working and going to university. One day he was taking my dinner because my parents and my wife, they work at the grocery store. So when he was coming in and going back to the store, someone went through the stoplight and killed him. The reason I stayed in PEI, because I wasn't planning on staying, is the people. Because I couldn't speak English, and when I opened the lunch counter, I didn't know a difference between fork and knife, and never seen the food like in Lebanon. It's not the same. Neighbors, they were helping me and even providing food for me. And after a few years, I stopped to realize this is a beautiful country with a golden opportunity if the people help you and they don't know you. And they're not asking for anything in return. That's what makes me stay. I brought all my kids back to the village, to Lebanon. I show them where I was born. I show them Lebanon. To keep the tradition we have. Sure, this country, it's good for us, but we provide for this country. We have our heritage, and we teach our children to be both Canadian and Lebanese. And I think this is very important, to respect both culture.
تفضل. يلا هاي قهوة أهلا وسهلا.
يلا صبوا هالقهوة وزيدوها هيل واسقوها للنشا مع ظهور الخيل. يلا صبوا هالقهوة وزيدوها هيل واسقوها للنشا مع ظهور الخيل. أهلا وسهلا. كيفك؟ انتوا جيتوا ب 58 58 جيت هنا؟
59 بعد سنة يعني.
كنا ساكنين كوكب ونحن يعني مرات ودعتونا كنا
يا تركت البلاد مش هوين كثير.
كيف حالكم يا مي؟ شقينا يكون كثير، إن شاء الله بنشوفكم بخير وسلامة. مسعتنا فيهم كثير يا مي، إن شاء الله بنشوفكم كلكم بخير وسلامة. الله يطعمنا. نحن كثير مشتاقين نشوفكم كلكم.
العيمة ونسير كان الله بريء وعم استنى مكتوب لي بشوفوا نعم بهالمكين وهيك الله امر يعني نشوف الشباب ونبسط فيهم ونبسط فينا.
There actually had to be a lot of self-confidence, I think. You know, it takes a lot of moxie, you know, just with to start off with nothing or next to nothing, and to believe that, no, I can do it, you know, I can do it. That's the attitude I heard, is that, you know, we might have to work, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, for years, but we'll do it. And I mean, that's another part of the emigration that I love, is that, I mean, These people, most of them, virtually all of them, had no English when they came here. They were actually going to the countryside on Prince Edward Island to sell things to people, and they couldn't speak the language. But they picked it up, you know? And I mean, I can imagine a Prince Edward Islander landing somewhere in, you know, in the vicinity of Beirut or Kafir and not being able to speak Arabic and going out to sell. Like, when I think of that, it puts it in perspective for me. Oh my God, these lads and lasses had, you know, they had to have a lot of confidence, and of course there was desperation. I mean, what do? You do that or you die, you know, you disappear. And they persevered.
Okay, so my full name is Nicholas Randy Ziad Tweel. I was born May 7th, 1974, right here in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island.
My name's Suhaila Tweel. I was born in CLAPEI, 1940.
My father came here in 1950. He came here with his family, his brother Solomon, better known as Sam, his sister Sue and Odette, and of course their mother, Sophia.
I got married to Said Tweel and moved to Canada 1958. Ivan Summer. And we didn't have anything. We didn't have any cash. He went to the CIBC and he said to them, "You want to give that man some money?" He said, "We don't know him." He said, "I'll sign my name behind his name because they are honest, hard-working people. They deserve some help."
You know, if you want to go back and look at the history, the Lebanese people in Prince Edward Island have been here for well over 125 years. So I think when my dad's family came here, you know, they'd been here for approximately maybe 50, 60 years. So a lot of the foundation was already poured.
And I couldn't speak any English, but I learned from my children when they went to school. I used to sit down, pretend that I'm teaching them. In the meantime, I was learning from them.
Going through school, I was told a lot of many stories of how hard it was and the challenges they had by being not from here, from another place, and were referred to as other colored people and stuff like that. So yeah, we had a lot of challenges.
And we were doing very well. One lady walked in and she said, "Why you want to work for the goddamn black people? You go and work for your own people." And they took all my staff, 4 girls, and all my customers. But one lady, Canadian lady, she called me up. Her name Pat McDonald, Tex McDonald's mother. Because she used to come into our store, and she said, "Do you know what they're doing behind your back?" I said, "No." She said, "They tried to take my name to take me to the other place they're gonna go and work. But I felt bad for you because you're nice people, and look what they're doing to you." Anyway, they left and they took all the customer. Nick, he was an infant. I used to take him and sit down behind the counter, leave the door open, and no customer, no staff. But I wouldn't give up. Afterward, I got staff, and I got the first esthetician to the island. They didn't know what esthetician was. And I went and advertised it on TV. I was the first beauty salon on the island, in the first place. And my business went up the roof.
It's quite incredible that what they had to go through. But I'm grateful that, you know, they were strong and they persevered and they were successful. There was no other way in their eyes. Dad would secretly feed them on the side, give them groceries because he knew they couldn't afford it, even though he wasn't in a good place to even support anybody else besides his own family. But he was always generous and kind, but under a way where nobody knew about it. And I still hear stories about it today.
You can talk to families today that can always, talk about the Lebanese peddlers that would not only come to their homes and sell dry goods and whatever the case may be, in some cases even stayed with them. So that's pretty good communications, pretty good rapport.
And I always tell my children they're lucky that they have two cultures. They have mother and father Lebanese, and they're born in Canada. Pick the best of the both and work with it.
I think there was a natural congeniality about the people that allowed, I mean, rural islanders were not the most open, trusting people in the world. I mean, they lived in their small little communities. They had very little knowledge of the outside world. And some of them were afraid of the Lebanese when they came, just because they looked different and they spoke differently.
Name is Fouad Haddad, born here in Charlottetown back in 1960, the old hospital, Charlottetown Hospital by the waterfront. And born and raised in that neighborhood on Pownell Street. Used to be the former Haddad's Grocery. And we were all born and raised there, my family. I got two siblings, Assam and George, sister Shua, and my mother Sue. Dad came to this country back in 1955, but my mother was here before him. She was one of the Tweels. Her brothers were Said and Sam Tweel, and still living Odette. They met back in CLAPEI when Dad was doing, he's a master stonemason. He was doing work for them in CLAPEI. And she left to Canada. They stayed connected with letters back and forth. And through those correspondence, he decided to come to Canada and touch base again with my mother, Sue. With the agreement to come here and to get married. They did back in close to probably 56 or so. Coming to this Canada was pretty hard for him back then, especially when I did some peddling from door to door in the country. Dad started basically with nothing. Went to the Blythe Brothers, used to be set up where the Sir William Davis Courthouse is now. And he went to him for a simple loan of $15,000 back in the early 60s. That's a lot of money. And de Blythe said, you know, he said to Dad, and Dad always told me the story, you people are hard-working people. So reaches out, gives him $15,000, started the grocery store. Yes, it was difficult. For me, being brought up going to school here, I kept to myself a lot. It was a struggle. Many times we were called names, various names. I don't like to repeat them. Sometimes they can be still, even at this age, can be hurtful. We met at her workplace. She worked in a restaurant, and we touched base from there and got to know each other. It was difficult in South Lebanon to drive by yourself because it was occupied by Israel. So in order for me to travel, I had to have company to go from one village to another. So every time I went to visit her, I had to have company with me. And I wanted to keep our how we connected private. So the person I kept taking with me was my late Aunt Camelia on the road. She said, where are you going? Are you going to go see this girl? I said, yeah. So it was quite frequent trips that I did just to see and stuff. So this was back in November, probably early part of November of '89. And 2 weeks later, I proposed to her, and 2 weeks after that, we got married.
I came in the winter time. I came with my regular, like no boots, no jacket, no nothing. And when I landed here in the airport, oh my God, the snow was like, I don't know how much.
There was a lot of snow back then.
Like, yeah, that was a shock for me. like I didn't prepare myself for this, for the weather, and it was hard at the beginning. I can't say it wasn't. It was a culture shock for me. I came here as young as 21 years old, and I miss my family a lot. All I wanted to do when I came here is just, I want to start a family, for my own family. Here we are now, I have 4 beautiful girls. Of course, I'm missing my family, my hometown and everything, but this is my second home now. When I go over to visit, I stay 1 month, but I couldn't wait till I come back. I didn't have this feeling before, but yeah. I love it. I love it here now.
You know, I'm born and raised here. I love it. Lebanon is my country where my parents come from. I love Lebanon. I go there every 5 years. I enjoy it. Stay 2 months, but I miss home here. And you know, that's the way it is. And I'm glad they came to Canada here. You know, never forget your foundation. Take your kids back to the country where they come from. Show them the land. Get to know the people. Eat the food there. And these are memories would be embedded for life. It's no use talking about the moon where I come from. If I don't go there, I don't know what it's like. So you have to go back, you know? Show them the land where you come from. You know, your people, our culture. And those are the best impressions that would stay forever.
The 100-year first Lebanese in the island, and we decided to have a big party, and that's why we moved to the CLAPEI hotel that time. And we have a committee, Frank Zakem, the president for the committee that time, Salman Twill, the president of the association, I was the vice president. We have a director like George Case, George Bassett, Abe Zakem, Gene Zakem, and Paul Twill. And we work on that, and we have very successful celebration that year.
Well, it started with a few group that started years ago in 1963. They were having parties, and it started with a small group, and it grew every year. I call all the women, 15 to 20 women, to come and help with the cooking. We bring them to the church hall. They enjoy coming because they get to see each other, and we give each other some tips on the food, and they love it. We even have a lady that comes all the way from Spring Hill, Nova Scotia. Every year she wants to come and help with the cooking. You know, she loves to meet all the women. Thank God for Elise. She does over 100 pounds of flours, so we could make fatire, like meat pie, spinach pie, and cheese pie. We make almost 3,000 pieces of them.
100-pound flour every year.
She mixes them herself.
At Sam's restaurant, and I bring them back down to the Hororima Hall. We do them there. I cut them. I remember I got more than 2,000 this year with a little ball with my poor hand.
Thousands of
But
them.
we enjoy to do them every year. I hope everybody enjoyed the levy and the food, and I start helping with the food with the levy since we came here.
Cooking, dancing, and the language, of course, to speak. And I'm hoping that when they gather together, they can talk their native language so they don't forget that.
I would like us as a community to kind of regroup and remind each other where we came from, never forget our roots and enjoy the future, but let's kind of do it together. We just purchased a clubhouse for us, so a new little hall. And that was something that just closed about a month ago, and we're in the works of renovating it and getting it ready. And the number one goal I would see to come out of that clubhouse is to develop an Arabic school. And the school would be housed within this association, and that would really keep our language strong, which is something I think that we really need.
My name is Roger Jabor. I was born in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island on July 15th, 1952.
I'm Barbara Jabor. I'm the second child born to Joseph and Amelia. And I was born on January the 4th, 1955 in Charlottetown. Her father had left Lebanon with his wife and a one-year-old son, and they came to New York by ship from Lebanon to New York, and they were denied entry. So they stayed on the ship, and the ship ended. They carried on. They landed in Cuba.
My father had a couple of friends here as well, and they did the traditional backpacking sales in the countryside. And
I think, David, one of them was your dad.
Yes,
and
I think
the other one
George
was
Dow
George
and Larry
Dow.
Rashed, and they got a truck eventually, and things grew, and they decided they got tired of the travel and peddling of wares, and decided to start a restaurant. And
So my grandfather got off in Cuba and stayed there for 10 years. And there he had 4 more children, I believe. My grandfather had a brother here in Charlottetown, Niemer Tweel. And I guess through correspondence back and forth, my grandfather decided to come to Canada.
my father started a restaurant with Larry's brother Louis. In 1963, they bought an old restaurant called Ment's Restaurant up by the old fire station. They turned it into the Town and Country Restaurant, and had a very, very successful business there for 18 years together, to 1981, I think.
So he loaded his wife and 5 children up and came by ship to Halifax and landed in Halifax in 1931, I believe. So my mother was about 4 years old then, I believe, 3 and a half, 4 years of age. I guess they came here, and my grandfather slowly got started in the grocery business. He received some credit from the Du Bois Likely family, and he set up shop. My grandfather took her to Lebanon, and there she met my dad in 1949 or 1949, I believe, 1950. And they 51, and they got married and came by ship. Took them a month to travel and landed here back in Charlottetown.
In addition to the Town and Country, they had a little place on the corner of Chestnut and Queen Street. I think it was called Joe's Snack Bar. It was next to the old Irving station there. And then they bought a business on the next corner. I think it was called the Northern Lunch. It was owned by Sam Tweel at the time, and they bought that and turned it into the Redwood Restaurant, I believe. So that was going at the same time as the Town and Country, and my grandfather and grandmother ran that while my father and Louis were running the busy Town and Country restaurant.
And my father never spoke any English when he first came here, or read any English, so he was pretty much self-taught.
My father was from a little village in the mountains called Haush el-Kanabi. I guess it was close to El-Kfir, where a lot of the Lebanese come from El-Kfir, probably 30 miles away from that, closer to Beirut.
That's where Mom was, parents were from.
Yeah,
Fire.
my mother's parents, the Tweel family, were from El-Kfir. People were amazing. We still have a few relatives there that I never knew, but they quickly took me in and told me all about how they were connected to my father. My father was an only child, by the way, so that's why his parents followed him here. You know, they had nothing back there to hold them there anymore. I think my grandfather had been the mayor of the village as well at the time. But their son had decided to come to the land of milk and honey, and they followed him.
I just want them to be honest and be good to people and caring, and that's really what it, and to love their family members and to be good to each other.
When our past can make us weep with joy, because that's what I sense, that your tears are tears of, they're not sorrowful tears. Yeah.
My name is Zaida Na'matuma. I was born in Marj Ayoun, South Lebanon. I finished my grade 12 in Marj Ayoun. I went to Tripoli, we call it Kennedy Memorial Hospital for nursing. I studied 4 years, and after that I was graduated. 1958. I was 20 years old, the whole. After that, I worked down the American University Hospital in Beirut. This picture, this is the Minister of Health, Saeb Islam, who hired me as supervisor on that government, and I was the first nurse in South Lebanon to take such position. So I used to go to villages with the group of nurses and whoever workers to Jabal Amal, which they need help, as for vaccinations for children, for adults, and lectures for pregnant women, sanitations, lectures how to take care of themselves. Mr. Najib Haddad visited the hospital and got used to know me, and he asked me, do you like to go to Canada? We get married to go to Canada. I told him, really, it's too hard for me to go and live there, but as a visit, I agree. My parents were a little bit against my ideas, but I promised them to go back. So we got married and we came in '62. We feel sorry what's happening in the Middle East, the whole war makes much destruction in building, in businesses, in human mentality, in physical and mental situation, in letting people to think of leaving their country and going far away. All of what they taught in their country, just plant it in another country and giving their fruits to other countries. لبنان أعطى للدين شهادة، نخبة شعب، ثقافة وزيادة. بكل مجمع نحتفل ونقول لبنان وطننا وكندا بلادي. بكل مجمع نفتخر ونقول لبنان وطننا وكندا بلادي.
My name is Shah Abu Rashed. I was born in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, November 27, 1956. Like my father didn't want me, just wanted me to learn and stay with the history of my background. You had to wake up every morning singing the Lebanese national anthem, saluting the Lebanese flag. He didn't want us to lose our heritage, that's all.
I moved to Canada in 1976 after we got married, and we lived 1 year in Lebanon after we got married, and the war started. And we have Fadi, he's 7 months old. We thought to just move to other countries, just like for more opportunity for us, peaceful, you know. That's what we moved, June 1976. A few weeks after we came, Ammul Labib, we were lucky we have family here. Ammul Labib asked me if I work with them at the restaurant, and I start working. A few months after, we bought the store like everybody else here. And we bought the store, I think, in November 1976, after we got here a few months, and we started working since that time. With the cousin here, with her family, and that didn't make me like... I
feel like a stranger.
Yeah, I felt like home, a second home. So after all that year now, if I go to Lebanon for months, I miss it here. I love them to keep remember where we came from, and to be proud like from Lebanese background.
So I'm Salam Hashim. I was born in Lebanon in Jdeida Marjayoun, 1941, and I went to school up till I was 17, and I joined the police force in Lebanon for 5 years. And then I left Lebanon in 1965, and I came to Canada, Prince Edward Island, 1965. Married Camila Haddad, and that's the reason I came here. But people were very friendly. It didn't take long to have a friend and have other people from the whole country, like Labib, Rashed, and Jeannie. Then Said Haddad and Najib and Zaid. She's from my town in Marjayoun. I've been in business almost 50 years, like 49 years, coming to 50 next year. And it was a store in every corner, you know. It was Sam Corey over here. It was Mr. Michael on Longwood Avenue, Mr. William Shamma on Houston Street, George Bassett on Grafton and Cumberland, and Larry has the restaurant. Larry's restaurant was famous. And Zakim, Albert Zakim has a big store. It was like a supermarket. Nice to get back there. Remember your root. You know, meet all your schoolmates, all your relatives and friends. My mom used to worry about me a lot. I said, Mom, I'm 60 years old. I'm okay. She said, but you're still my son. It is very important, like for young people to know where their root, where their grandparents come from, and if they have a chance to go and visit, it'll be nice because they have relatives left over there, and they have lots of people who love them. They ask about them every day on the phone, and they see them on the website. Tallah was very, very, very nice person. You meet him, you laugh. He used to love his family so much and worry about Joe a lot, you know. Next thing Joe become premier, next thing his son become premier. So I think Atallah, if you know, he'd be so happy. First time I ran in Lebanon, 1954, and I kept running here. I ran like over 100 races. My best run was in the marathon, 26-mile marathon. When I was 45 years old, I did 2-hour, 45-minute marathon. I urge people to take on sport. If you don't like running, do something else, exercise and walking, and good diet, make different, and hopefully you live good life and long life.
The disposition of these people, and the message that came through to me is that in many cases they actually became close friends. Tom Michael, for instance, you know, who pedaled for a long, long time. I talked to a man, Harold McLeod from Irishtown, and he said that, you know, they were so happy to see Tom Michael come simply because he brought, for one thing, he brought the news of the countryside, and he was just a fine fellow.
My name is Shihab Paul Haddad. I was born in the old Charlottetown Hospital, October 5th, 1965. 1977, at the age of, it's probably around 11 or 12, I can't. My dad took us to Lebanon to live there. When we arrived at the airport in Beirut at the time, it was a very dim airport. It was, there was military everywhere. Lighting was very dim, like you go from area to area and sometimes in fairly dark spots and then till you get to light. And then we arrived at my aunt's apartment and I noticed that there was people actually, there was sleeping bags and stuff like that in the hallway in the building in the back where people were actually sleeping there. They left their apartments upstairs and sleeping at night downstairs to avoid the shelling. The next day when we woke up, it was a beautiful sunny day. There was people all over the place. The streets were busy. Everything was busy. But the buildings around on my aunt's balcony, when I looked, I realized all the buildings were damaged and there was bullet holes and concrete, was broken on the buildings and stuff like that. And the streets, down the streets, there was also the same thing that you could tell there was big holes in the grounds and potholes and stuff like that. So this is what we arrived to. Couldn't get an education. We'd go for a month or 2 months and then we'd go home for 3 months and then moving from one school to another was confusing, different teachers and different friends and different, So I personally got involved in a militia sort of thing in South Lebanon because it was the only way of income. Also it was mandatory. I was in charge of a team at the age of 16, which included radio and one carrying radio and the other one stretcher and first aid and stuff like that. And then there was 2 heavy machine guns and the others were machine guns. And we do go certain towns that there was, let's say, at the time they called them terrorists or other parties that were attacking and stuff like that. So we'd go into towns and worked as an army, really. It was becoming very, very dangerous, and my parents said enough is enough. If you're old enough to be in the militia, you're old enough to travel. So they bought us tickets. I couldn't go through Beirut because the Syrian army was in control and other left-wing militias were in control of the airport, and so we had to leave through the south of Lebanon into another country, and from there we flew back to Canada at the age of 18, 19 years old, something like that. It was a totally different, strange world coming back. It was like being in a nightmare and then coming back to total calm and civilization and everything that was just, everything was so organized. It was hard to adjust again. I think that's what makes me so positive about when I work and when I establish my businesses here. I appreciate my government. I appreciate my country. It's a great feeling. It's a proud feeling. Very proud to be Canadian.
My name is Sohail Abu Rashed. I born in CLAPEI, Lebanon. About 1943, December 18.
My name is Elias Abu Rashed. They call me Louis here in Canada. They start to call me Louis. And we came, me and Sai, the same year, 1959. And I was born in April 1937. We came over from Lebanon, across Europe, and New York and Montreal, and we came by train from Montreal to Moncton. And there where I met my brother and his friends there. And we came to Charlottetown, and it was a beautiful reunion. And we started to work right away.
We used to be 4 of us one time. Me and Liaz and Labib, my brother Labib, and my brother George. We started going out one by one. Each one of us have his own business.
It was hard to say goodbye to your parents, because There's already two of my brothers were here already, and two more to leave, and my sister in Beirut there lives away from them. That was very, very hard on us. But we had to do it. And thank God we came to a good country, and we start to go back and see my parents all the time. You know, that was beautiful. We're blessed.
My name is Tina Davis. He was a backpedaler. He and his wife came here in 1888. They had two sons that lived. One was Joe Basha, and the other one was John, who was my father. They came here and they settled on the lower King Street and set up a grocery store there. Set up another store in the Magdalene Islands. He stayed there for the summer, and then he would go back. And they had a son, Joseph, their son, who was only 23. He was over in New Glasgow. I think New Glasgow was a port or where some of their supplies came through. But anyway, he was killed by a train. They blame her death for the depression that she had for losing her son like that. They ended up having a lady from the Magdalene Islands. Her name was Christine Longafy, and she would come and help them at the store and looked after the children. My grandfather died when he was maybe, well, he came here in '88 and he died when he was maybe 60 or 70. My father was actually almost like you'd call orphaned. Then he met my mother, who was from the Magdalene Islands, and they lived quite near where my father was living. And so they met each other somewhere in that area and married. And I come from a family of 8 children. And my brother, he had one son who would carry the name over. When my parents were married, they bought a store on University Avenue. They kept the store for a long time, right across from Papa Joe's, turned into a yoga place. I wished I could have met more of the Bashas. If my father would have lived longer, I think when we start growing up and that he could tell some of these stories, or we could find them together and things like this. And I would, you'd like to keep the name Basha some down, through our children. But I often wished I had found out more things about my father's side, but he died young, and we just thought we knew everything there was to know.
So there was a lightness and a gregariousness, I think, to the personality that helped a lot. Some of them were cranky. I don't want to stereotype here, because I also heard stories about how cranky some of them could be. But overall, they were accepted as part of the people's lives. They found that niche, and pretty soon it was a common thing to see Tom Michael or Frank Reed, coming down the lane with the pack, which, by the way, could weigh up to 100 pounds. They were tough as well. They had to be tough to carry that all over the countryside.
I met George in Lebanon. He lived next door to us, like 2 houses from our house.
We stayed there in Lebanon for 2 years, from 48 till 50. Came from Beirut, went to Italy at the time, Naples. We stayed there for 10 days, to get another connection for another boat to come to Canada, Yeah, we have an uncle here, live in Charlottetown, we came here, and we're still here. His name Atalla Gez. My brother Albert, he went to know him, and my uncle George, George Gez. He started on the road. That's my father here. When 1951, he went to buy a horse and wagon and he started battling on the road, I think year or year and a half. And in 1953, he bought a truck and he started driving with the truck like.
But we used to say, okay, in the evening we're going to meet in Alberton at the hotel. We used to stay together. Or in Surrey, you know, or Montague. Like we stay in Montague for 2 or 3 days, Surrey 2 or 3 days, me and George Abour. We go to Summerside, we stay a week in Summerside and work all around Summerside. And then we go 1 more week to Tignish or Alberton.
No, I remember the first time I went to New Glasgow, like in that, and that's the first day I went, and I went and knocked from door to door, and I have a good day selling that day, very good. The first day, you know, I'm telling you, I was very excited. I said, crap, I said, that's going to be my business. I said, before that I was working, you know, with my uncle there. Oh, I working 56 hours a week for $10. And that day I think I made about $40. I said, oh boy, I said, I don't think I'll work for anybody else as long as I live. I think I'll stick to the rag business, the clothing business, you know. And I'm still in it, like, you know.
Everywhere we went, we were treated right, like we were treated good with the people, you know. We were honest with them and they were good to us. Never told me about that.
No, never. I don't want to tell you about the fishing places, that's why, because I know you like fishing. I don't want to tell you the secret.
Well, we used to go fishing in the morning too, before we go to work, because you don't start work until about 10 o'clock. You know, you don't want to go knock at the door at 8 o'clock in the morning, so. We used to get up at 6, 7, go fishing for a couple of hours, and the lady at the hotel used to fry the fish for us.
Exactly.
And we'll have it for supper.
Even up till now, I got some people come from, I called them 56 years ago. Some they still come to the store, like, you know, they remember those days, like, you know, I still have them in the store, like from Surrey.
I'll bet you still have customers.
I still have customers. They come from O'Leary, from Tignish.
Side Tweel, Clement Tweel, George Abour, Albert Dowd, and George Giz.
Well, Mr. Michael used to be, you know, Michael, and Mr. Shamma, and Joe Case.
Joe Case, yes.
There used to be, you know, used to be go take the train, go to Bredalven, and they go to Trustego and someplace. And I was surprised what the country people was telling me. Sometimes they have a suitcase, one hand, and one in the back, one in the front, like, you know, just walking through. And they did that for quite a while, like, say. And, you know, Mrs. Reed.
Her
Reed, husband
Mrs.
used to
Reed.
go, you know, that's way before us, like, you know. I think I've been every road. I believe in PI myself, you know, really, you know. I went for so many years, and you go there, you just keep every day. You take a different route, like, you know, it's kind of.
And we never had one bad incident. I mean, all the time we were.
Yeah, you know, people very, very good, really, always good to us, like, you know.
Yeah.
The 71, I think. I have 5 kids then, and I figure it's time to stop, like, and the business getting better, and like, in the store getting very good, like, and I stopped the road then, like, you know.
I stopped in '63 when we got married. I stopped then.
That claiming of identity finding out really who you are, being inspired by the elders. I could really get on a tangent on this, because I think part of the problem with the modern age, you know, despite all the material benefits, is that popular culture has acted as this powerful solvent that wants to dissolve all of this uniqueness, wants to make everybody the same. And I regret that, because there's a richness, and I think people miss it. Like, there's nothing more important than that sense of belonging and being connected. And there's a hunger for that in the human heart. And even though the culture right now is moved off in another direction, that hunger will pull things back. it'll pull it back. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're going back and inviting others back to the particular culture, the richness and the joy and the sorrow of what it means to be you and what it meant to be your ancestors. Yeah.
يا ستي ويا ستي غاب القمر جيت انتي غاب القمر ونجومه ضويتي علينا انتي هي وهي وهيلي يا غزلان البري وكل من يوقع بالشدة وينده يا بتولي بتولي راحت عالشام لاقوها كل العرسان يا عارس هدي خيلك حتى تفكفك حنان ويا بياع العناب والعنابي خطفوني الغجار من تحت خيمة مجدلي والتشتشي والتشتشي والخوخ تحت المشمشي وكل ما هب الهوا لقطف لريمة مشمشي ريمة ريمة لحن دقة شعرك أسود ومنقة واللي حبك بيبوسك واللي بغضك شو بيتلقى هي وهي وهي لينا تشتكي لكنك عايرينا تنغسل أواعي ريمة وننشرهن على الياسمينة ويا بياع العناب والعنابي خطفوني الغجار من تحت خيمة مجدلي والتشتشي والتشتشي والخوخ تحت المشمشي وكل ما هب الهوا لقطف لريمة مشمشي.
والآب والابن والروح القدس آمين. بارك يا رب هذا الطعام ومن أعده ومن يتناوله. بارك يا رب هذا الجمع الحاضر. Bless, O God, all the people who is present here. Bless the food in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. صحتين.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Well done, David. Thank you. Look, is that Elvis Presley's in the lineup? Hello.
Hi, David.
How are you? How's the food?
That's enough, David. It's delicious.
Food's good? Delicious?
Would you like to try anything? Hey.
Colin, how are you? I think it's good to see you.
Yeah.
That was Saturday you called me. Yesterday. How's it going, guys? How's the food? Good. Good? Yeah. How's the food, guys?
What?
Yeah? Delicious. Where'd she go? Hello, how are you? Is it
Good, great. Great evening.
Beautiful evening. Hi, sister.
Hi, David.
How are you?
Good, and you?
Good. Hello. How are you?
Hi, David.
How are you?
Good, good, good.
Everything okay?
Yes. Lovely.
Good. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, David. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank
إذا معنا identity يا أخي.
Hello, Daoud.
Hello.
كيفك؟
Good. How are you?
Oh, منيحة أنا.
Some delicious Lebanese food. Hi, Dahlia.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. Yeah.
How's the married life?
David, no photos.
It's
a nice thing.
Nice
I'm sure we'll look at this in the future, and it'll have more value to understanding it, and seeing it, and for the kids growing up and everything.
I don't feel like I need that this late at night. Just getting me. Hi, David.
Hello. Enjoy.
Right there. Food is our medicine, and the food is our disease.
عدن ولقيت شجر ححور لقيت بلد الحواري عم يشربوا بالدور علينا بدور السعد والله يلعنك يا
wants to get started, so let's get everybody fed and get them dancing. Come on.
Abraham Zachem, and Lois Case, Paul Tweel,
George Dow. Well, I think I remember we're at Larry's restaurant, like, for the grand opening, and there's lots of people there, like. And somebody come out, I think I told the guys to come out, I said, well, you know, it's a nice time, everyone having a great time, enjoying themselves. I said, you fellas should have your own club.
I remember it was above Zachem's store in corner of Weymouth and Grafton, and we had a number of meetings up there, and then I think everyone decided to get a bylaw or a constitution put together and form a club.
One member from different families, yeah. So that we'd have somebody representing each group, like a Rashed. One person from the Rashed would be all the Rasheds and all the Reeds and Shammers and all. So that way we took in everybody and nobody was left out, more or less.
Peter Case, Harry Shammer, Paul Tweel, Frank Michael, Abraham Zachem, Kenny Tull, is it Kenny Tull?
Yeah,
Tull, and Paul Case, Robert McCarris, Lewis Case, George Dow, Gabriel Case, Frank Weatherby, and William Shammer. May of 1963, they tried to get a representative from all the families in Charlottetown at that time, and to give a better representation so nobody would feel left out. Whatever money we made, like with all that accumulation of money, this is where we are today.
Yes.
With the investment that was made into the clubhouse.
Because everything, the money that was shown, would have to be given away when you're a non-profit. So we decided to leave it that way until we build up enough funds for our building.
In Sydney Street.
That's right.
It's called the Oddfellows Club. Oddfellows Hall,
yeah.
Oddfellows Hall.
And it was a good crowd, you know, always at the full house.
Well, it was a lot of fun when you were that young to be able to dance with your mother and see your mother and father dancing.
We'd make 75, 70 to 100.
75 to 100 that time, yeah? Because the room's always full.
After so many years at the Oddfellows Hall, we ended up going to the Holy Redeemer Hall in 79 to 81. But just telling you the entertainment there, receipts and entertainment membership, with membership money coming in, was near $3,500, and the assets at that time, the $2,000 in the bond, and the savings account had over $1,000, and current account had over $300, and the cash in hand was $61, and the liquor supply was $162. And so we had about $3,600 It's for assets back then, and that was 1981. There's Alex Campbell, the Premier, the Lieutenant Governor George McKay next, and the Mayor Dorothy Corrigan, and I was the President at that time, Paul Tweel. And that was, this picture was taken on January the 6th, 1971, and it's probably one of the first events that we had all the government officials coming to our levee.
We used to invite about 80 people, free. After a while we cut it down to 60, 50, 40, and then eventually they paid their own way except for half a dozen people, because it was getting too out of hand. But
Yeah.
it was a real party, you know, for the members. And they'd be about close to about 150, 200.
Oh yeah. Said Tweel or Fuad Father or something used to play the drums there.
Yeah, Said
yeah.
Tweel, George Bassett.
And George Bassett. I think they all just
the flute,
yeah.
We formed a group to go to Ottawa. We had the men's group and the ladies group. And we went to Ottawa. That's, oh geez, I forget the year now, but anyway, we landed in Ottawa and we had a great time. And then we even had our young girls, boys and girls. David was probably a dancer in those days. And Labib and Jean, I think they still have the costumes for the children. We used to have your kids dancing.
Well, Bank Hall, we had a lot of good times over there. One year we invited people from Fredericton, New Brunswick, and some of Halifax came, and we had a big do that weekend. It was a beautiful weekend. I think it was the end of July.
Some of the Khalils.
Still talking about it.
Khalils, yeah. We had like a lobster party over at Rosebank Hall, Zakeman's cottage over there, and we had they have a good sized hall at that time, and places like Fredericton, New Brunswick, and Halifax, some of the representatives of the Lebanese community, they all came that weekend.
Some of the families wouldn't talk to one another in those days. So when we got in as an executive, as a young group, the younger group, well, we didn't care about all that. We just wiped that away.
That was all behind
and then
us.
we got to form the club started, and with the club being started, then the parents came along, and then it just developed and get going. And at one time we tried to have membership cards. So when I was president, I said no more cards, no more membership. Everybody belongs to the club, and that way we got everybody involved. And for the matter of $10 or a card, to say I'm a member, I'm not a member, I did away with that.
They brought that back.
And now we brought it back because we didn't call it membership, but we called it a building fund. $10 a donation to the building fund. And that's where a few dollars, $400 or $500 come in to build up the kitty.
And they give you the right to vote for the executive the following year.
This building will do as a starting point for the older members of the club, members of families, where they can walk to the clubhouse and they could play cards and socialize during the day. Whereas they're sitting home, a lot of them, they say, we've got nowhere to go, can't see anybody, never talk to anybody. So this way, the doors are open, they can come here, they play cards, have a drink, whatever they want to do, watch TV or so. So it's a clubhouse for us, I'm concerned. It's just a starting point. And if any other time we want to buy another building, then we have this to work with. And if we need to have bigger functions, we'll go to the Holy Redeemer or to the church out there, Orthodox church, whatever. So we don't really need a building off right away. So if we have 12 big events a year, we can have them at the Holy Redeemer or whatever, and the CP Hotel. So I think with this, it'll probably bring the smaller groups together.
There's one thing that should be started again is a ladies group, because without a ladies group, a ladies auxiliary, because they're a big help with us in getting things organized and doing different things and raising the funds. And I think my wife was the president at that time, even though she wasn't Lebanese, but that didn't matter at the time because others didn't want to do it, so they kind of squeezed her into doing that. But they had fun. The ladies, like I said, they always say the ladies auxiliary in any function or organization is always a big
the big thing. The big secret now is to keep the kids involved, like the dance group and all that, and bring that back. Because if we don't catch the little ones now, they won't bother going into the dance group, the depke and all that.
No, you're right.
At least if we have a room here somewhere, they can practice a bit, you know, 10, 15 kids, 20 kids, so we don't have to fight to get a place, or is it booked, not booked. So, yeah, I think we're on the road.
Keep up the good work.
I just wish them the best in the future myself, and you know, they got to continue on and add to what that we didn't really. We committed in making the money, so they're going to have to see the money get used properly, and which they had done is made the investment in the building, but they got to keep the program going, and as they said, got to get the young crowd involved from day one.
I appreciate your time coming in today, man. This means a lot. Thank you, Abe.